In 2013, a group of 19 researchers ventured into the depths of Siberian wilderness, in the mountains of Shoria, Kemerovo Oblast. Leading the team was Russian researcher Georgy Sidorov, who decided to venture into the dangerous and unforgiving landscape to visit a particular region that had sparked his interest since hearing about it. According to the rumors, there was a certain place in Shoria Mountains, locally known as Gornaya Shoria, that looked like the ruins of what seemed to be an expansive structure. And according to the stories, the place was ancient and had been there for as long as anyone could remember. In itself, the story was already a curious case. Why in the world would there be a large man-made structure in the middle of nowhere, let alone in a place that is virtually inaccessible due to its high altitude and difficult climate? Still, this made all the more interesting to Sidorov and his team, who climbed the site regardless. What they found was more shocking than they could ever imagine. There in Gornaya Shoria, Sidorov and the rest of the group saw a towering structure that could rewrite the early history of humanity. An enigma in the heart of the Siberian wilderness. In the vast expanse of southern Siberia, Russia lies Gornaya Shoria, a mountainous landscape known for its Switzerland-like scenery and picturesque taiga biome. Somewhere in this remote region where humans have scarcely stepped foot into, was a peculiar landscape that attracted a handful of curious researchers and locals. Now known as the Gornaya Shoria Megaliths, the landscape features an imposing formation of large granite rocks that were seemingly piled upon one another. Actually, large was a bit of an understatement. The granite rocks were gigantic, and each rock measured 16 to 23 feet in height, with an estimated weight of about 3,000 to 4,000 tons. Stacked in a consistent pattern, the pile of rocks looked like a huge wall or facade of some sort, so big that it could be seen even from afar. At first glance, it seemed like a natural formation that incidentally looked like a gigantic wall. But upon closer look, the precise cut and angle of each rock were much more evident. Not only that, but it was seemingly arranged in a well-thought-of manner, leaving almost no gaps between each of the rocks. In one part of the site, there was a line of perfectly arranged granite blocks that Sidorov calls in his records as the wall. Then, in some other areas were openings made either by large, unusual gaps between stones or cut right into the gigantic rock, as if they were intentionally made as entryways. For Sidorov and the others who had been studying that place for some time, the answer was clear. These were megaliths. Megaliths are large stones moved from one area to another and formed by prehistoric cultures to build structures or monuments. Interestingly, the reason for the construction of these behemoth structures is as mysterious as who exactly built them. Granted that some were built as either tombs, monuments, and other types of sacred sites, while others were believed to be boundary markers of territory and astronomical clocks, many more still baffled archaeologists as to what their original purpose was. The problem was that many were built during prehistory, before the writing system and record-keeping was invented. As such, until no other developments are made that could give a definitive answer to what they were built for, mainstream science could only make an educated guess. Megaliths have been discovered in many parts of the world, particularly in places where ancient civilizations and cultures once flourished. This includes the majority of Europe, Africa, Asia, particularly the Middle East and Egypt, South America, and islands in the Pacific. Many of these megaliths were thousands of years old, with Göbekli Tepe reigning as the oldest megalithic structure constructed by humans estimated to have been built 9,500 BCE, twice as old as Stonehenge. However, was it really the oldest? Let's circle back. The Gornaya Shoria megaliths is an unassuming rock formation nestled in the vast mountainous regions in southern Siberia. From afar, it looked like pieces of rocks stacked together, albeit in a weird way that made it look like an unfinished gargantuan stone fortress. But then, up close, when you're standing next to the rocks that make up the formation, you might start to think that it might just actually be. This peculiarities of a supposed stone formation led many to believe that the Gornaya Shoria megaliths were man-made. The site also features flat stones supported by colossal upright rocks, resembling megalithic structures like dolmens. Speaking of dolmens, Russia is dotted with these large megalithic structures formed by putting large capstones supported by flat undressed rocks, which look like a simple chamber or tomb. Usually, a dolmen would have an entryway, either cut through the stone or by leaving a gap between two large rocks. Most were built as graves, but some dolmens weren't. One of the most popular sites is the dolmens of the North Caucasus, found in the western parts of the Caucasus Mountains. The dolmens there looked drastically different from the usual. Most dolmens were built simply, with large flat stones formed like a house, in a way that looks like a giant table, which was why it got its name. However, the dolmens in the Caucasus were constructed using several flat stones stacked like bricks, and a flat but thick stone that serves as a roof with round or arched portholes. Now, the Gornaya Shoria megaliths were a bit similar to the dolmens, but while the dolmens were clearly man-made, the Gornaya Shoria's classification as an artificial structure was still doubtful. The immense size of each block and the high altitude of the place make transportation of the materials seemingly impossible. And if the Gornaya Shoria was indeed a man-made structure, why was it built in such a place? And for what reason? The discovery of megalithic structures in Siberia and Russia in general was surprising to many, mainly because Siberia and some parts of Russia was traditionally viewed of as a peripheral region due to its harsh climate and remote location. However, the recent discoveries of megaliths, particularly the Caucasus dolmens and the fortified site of Arkaim, made scientists rethink its history. With this in mind, it's not entirely impossible that Gornaya Shoria megaliths was indeed a product of an ancient civilization lost to time, with advanced technology and knowledge of engineering. Besides the seemingly impressive stonework, the rocks in the Gornaya Shoria megaliths show indications of melting. Some of the stones appear to have been melted or forcibly reshaped. Sidorov hypothesizes that the carved portions of the wall and the melted sections testify to a large explosion similar to a nuclear bomb. While this was all conjecture for now, it's nonetheless interesting to think about. Given that the formation looked like a wall or facade, was the Gornaya Shoria a mere remnant of a glorious structure that was suddenly destroyed by an event so destructive that it turned the whole thing into pieces of unrecognizable rubble? Proponents of antediluvian world theory believed that Gornaya Shoria megaliths might have been constructed before the flood. While it's a bit far-fetched to say that, it somehow aligns with the story of antediluvian civilizations, wherein great, highly advanced cities were built only for it to be destroyed by a cataclysmic event. The taiga in its current form, which covers most of the Shoria Mountains, was relatively new and was only at least 12,000 years old. Before the expansion of the taiga biome in the northern parts of the world, Siberia was mostly covered with mammoth steppe. Whereas northern Eurasia was covered with a thick ice sheet that was unfit for living, southern Siberia had a relatively better environment during the Pleistocene epoch. As such, it's actually not surprising if ancient cultures lived and prospered there for some time. What's even more interesting was that, according to early studies done on the site, the megaliths might have been very, very old, even older than Göbekli Tepe. According to the notes made by Sidorov, they might have been up to 100,000 years old. That's about 10 times the oldest known human structures, way back to the early days of Homo sapiens. If proven true, then it could potentially rewrite everything we know about history. If true, then the dawn of human civilization would be pushed back 100,000 years or so, which might have ended at the last ice age. Now, a question had to be asked. Was it really that old? Or better yet, was it actually man-made? The Gornaya Shoria megaliths might be indeed old, but since there are limited information and research done on the subject, nobody knows for sure when it was formed. Moreover, since carbon dating rocks would only give the result of when the rock was actually formed, not when it was built for a specific purpose, it's difficult to know when Gornaya Shoria was erected, if it was actually an artificial structure. Now on to the more important question. So, were Gornaya Shoria megaliths actually megaliths? The most widely accepted explanation among mainstream scientists was that it's only a natural formation. You may be asking, why is it seemingly arranged in a precise way? While it's rare, perfectly geometrical and precise natural formations do actually exist, such as the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, Tweefelfontein organ pipes in Namibia, and Externstein in Germany. There are a number of theories concerning the formation of the unique site. One such explanation is that this was a regular outcrop of bedrock created by tectonic activity. The uplifting and fracturing of rock layers led to cracks and fissures, which caused it to look like clear-cut blocks. Add to that the weathering and erosion over long periods of time, and the bedrock that juts out of the earth was beaten to a point it became like a wall. Well, that is the mainstream science explanation, by the way. Some believed in both. The actual formation was natural, but the humans who found it worked on the place to make it livable. As for Sidorov and his team, they vacated the place later on due to the harsh conditions of the area. Since then, there have been no reported studies done on the place that the general population of the world knows of. It was quite strange that a site as interesting didn't receive much attention from scholars, probably because it was already dismissed as a rock formation. For now, the Gornaya Shoria megaliths are classified as natural rock formations. Unfortunately, like some megalithic structures, there wasn't any other evidence found on the site that suggests otherwise. More study on the site needs to be done to confirm whether it's a rock formation or a megalithic structure. Human knowledge about the past is continuously evolving, which was evident in the past century or so. For a long time, people believed Egypt and the Indus Valley were the oldest civilization ever, until Sumerian civilization came to light. For decades, people thought that Sumerian civilization was the earliest in the world, and it still is. But the discovery of Göbekli Tepe put that into question. So who's to say that some other, way older civilization, which had been lost to time, was just lurking in the depths of inaccessible locations in the world? Could that be the Gornaya Shoria megaliths? Let us wait and see. We wonder, did you know that? What do you think? Did the beginning of civilization actually start right from Gornaya Shoria? Let us know in the comments. Support us by sharing the video and subscribing to the channel.